All right, so good afternoon. I'm Clarissa. I'm a fellow CASA, and we are going to talk about QPR. It's called Question, Persuade, Refer. There is a PowerPoint that I will be going through, but first, I'm just going to let us watch this video real quick. It shouldn't be too long, so let me share my screen. Here we go.
I have my ups and downs. Anybody else?
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual,
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
or getting really mad, not able to sleep, or sleep too much,
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late,
Suddenly not doing stuff you used to love.
or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed, not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself.
It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said something.
I wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask.
They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in there.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
That's crazy.
Don't be such a drama
you're
queen.
making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing yourself over. It's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself.
What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help? We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
A lot of people think about killing themselves. Adults and kids.
most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead. I can't live with this.
I'm gonna kill myself,
Take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure. But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself. Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
but don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone you can trust. Make a list together. Write them. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet, so he always knows where to turn.
Be sure your home is safe. If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, just lock it up. Get it out of the house. Bullets too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask. Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut.
Because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference. All the difference. Your kid's life.
Okay, so this topic is kind of heavy. This topic is kind of deep, and it can definitely be scary to talk about something so serious. So if you need to take a break from this talk, it should last about, maybe an hour or so. If you need to take a break, that's fine. Come back to us if you want to. That's good. If you want to see the recording later, that's fine too. But I just wanted to give you that out. I'm about to sneeze. Hold on. I am so sorry. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen again. And we are going to go through this PowerPoint. Again, in the little chat box, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, okay? And we can work through those together. The more questions, the better. All right, here we go. So this is QPR, question, persuade, refer. So we're going to be going over youth primarily. This can go with adult suicidal ideation as well. However, because we work primarily with kids, I felt like this would probably be most appropriate. So throughout this course, this is exactly what we're going to be going over. We're going to talk a lot about the national issue of suicide. I've got some Kentucky statistics as well. Evidence-based risk and protective factors in prevention. This is a huge, huge thing. So we'll discuss that more when we get there. Then we'll talk about the Q, the P, and the R, and we'll describe some basic interventions for reducing suicide attempts. Okay. So here is our map of the United States and prevalence of suicide. So if you look out west, there are lots and lots and lots of prevalence of suicide, but if you look more towards the Midwest and in the Bible where we're at, it looks like there's a big red hot spot right over Southern Illinois and Western Kentucky. And so that's where we're at, and that's why it matters to us. So over the past 12 months, this of course is data from the Youth Risk and Behavior Survey. So this is a national thing. Kentucky students at grades 6, 8, 10, and 12 fill out what's called the Kentucky Incentive for Prevention, and it is based off of the Youth Risk and Behavior Survey. And this is just to collect data of substance alcohol abuse, as well as suicide and things like that. So from that data, they've come up with 15.8 have seriously considered suicide, 12.8 have made a plan, 7.8 attempted suicide one or more times, 2.4 made a suicide attempt that led to treatment by a doctor or a nurse. And for 15 to 24-year-olds, suicide was the second leading cause of death in 2011. So here's our Kentucky prevalence. And again, this is based off of the Kentucky Incentives for Prevention, and this is our 10th grade data. So we are over towards the bottom at the Four Rivers District, and 9.3. And this was from 2016 data. So this is the percentage of 10th graders that actually attempted at least one time within the past year of taking that survey. So we are third highest, because then right next to us, our neighbors at Pennyroyal, they were highest across the state at 10.4%. So that is roughly, that's roughly our 1 in 10, if we round up a hair. So in Kentucky, more than 30% of our LGBTQ youth report at least one suicide attempt within the last year. More than 50% of our transgender youth will have at least one suicide attempt by their 20th birthday. And youth suicides outnumber youth homicides. So when we're looking at some of our CASA cases, they come from very, very distressed situations most of the time. And so looking at that trauma that builds up is going to be an important part of looking at the big picture and seeing what's going on. So here's more Kentucky data. So as you see, in 2014, there was 18 that did complete suicide, and that number kept going up. And then we haven't gotten the full report for 2018 for statistic purposes. They are finalizing that, and so we should have that data eventually. But the preliminary records showed that there are 31 children and teens. So here are some brief statistics to remember. Boys die 4.34 times as often as girls do. Why do we think that is? You can unmute yourself and answer any questions that I ask. That would be great.
I think they lack coping skills that girls often have.
That's a great suggestion. It's also, they choose more lethal means too. That's part of it as well. But girls attempt 3 times as often as boys do. Exactly, absolutely. And so at the bottom one, because this is more for like school guidance counselors, it's going to use a lot of language that might not necessarily apply to us as CASA advocates. So especially when it's talking about the Axis 1 mental disorder, that's not something we're required to know. That's not something we're required to diagnose or have the ability to diagnose as CASA volunteers. But that is a good place to start too, with the conversation of a lot of times those who complete suicide have an underlying condition that is not treated, not diagnosed efficiently or properly. So in our schools, of 1,000 students in our school this year, 159 will think seriously about suicide. 13 will plan how to kill themselves. 8 will make a suicide attempt, and 2 to 3 will make an attempt to receive medical care. And when our schools have thousands of students in them, then of course these numbers fluctuate. So here are some risk factors. I said earlier we would go over risk and protective factors. So these are our risk factors that are problematic. So mental illness, we kind of talked about that a little bit. Substance abuse, whether they're experimenting or trying or whatever the case may be. Substance abuse is impulsive. It can be, and that is where we are seeing some of those risk factors that if it's mind altering, then it could potentially make us more impulsive. Firearms in the house.
Clarissa?
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm sorry. I think someone's mic is still on though, because it's garbling what you're saying. Can you mute me?
Okay. Is everybody muted now? Maybe. All right. So going on with the risk factors, firearms in the household, making sure that not only are they unloaded and locked, but making sure that they're secure in a place where, like, if it's behind a lock, making sure that we don't have access to the key, or making sure that we don't have access to get there one way or another, because, you know, teens aren't mischievous at all. It happens. Previous suicide attempts, non-suicidal self-injury, cutting is a risk factor, burning is a risk factor, exposure to friends, family members' suicide, and then low self-esteem. So for every risk factor, the more protective factors that we have in place are the safeguard. They are the baby gate that allow us to not fall into the water. So some of our major protective factors is family and school connectedness. So right now with the pandemic going on and us being so disconnected from school for our kiddos, that is actually a risk factor. It can be. But on the flip side, school is not necessarily the safest place for some students as well. So emphasizing those important school relationships is going to be some of the best protective factors that they can have. Safe schools, and that's what I was talking about too. If we've got difficulties with bullying, if we're not running around with the correct crowd, if we're not in a safe place as far as school is concerned, then that can be a risk factor. However, having that one trusted person at school can also be that protective factor too. Reduced access to firearms, academic achievement, and positive self-esteem. There are many different protective factors too. This list is very, very limited to the amount of protective factors that there are. So our goal for youth suicide prevention is all about reducing those risk factors and increasing those protective factors to make sure that we keep our kids safe. It doesn't all fall on our shoulders. It takes a village. But we can do our part by being here, by learning these skills, and by helping in this way to reduce those risk factors and increase those protective factors. I'll just give you guys a second to read through this, so I don't feel like I'm reading everything to you, because I know you can read. So this has been going on for a very long time. So what's different now? Why now? It is that the problem's not going away. So we have to find some type of prevention to where we're not just pulling people out of the stream, but we have to go and see why they're falling in. So if you've lost a loved one, you have a political voice. A social movement has begun. There are many, many movements across the Commonwealth in Kentucky to get legislators talking about more proactive suicide prevention methods and how to keep our young ones safe. Legislators are continually working on bills to help promote protective factors. The newest one that I found, and I thought this was really cool, under Senate Bill 42, beginning August 1st, 2020, so this August, identification badges issued to public school students in grades 6 through 12 would on the back contain the contact information for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, National Sexual Assault Hotline, and a National Prevention Hotline, Suicide Prevention Hotline. This is giving our young ones, our seniors, our sixth graders, our everything in between, they're giving them information that could potentially be helpful in moments of crisis. So I think that's wonderful to be able to move in a forward direction for protective measures in a proactive way. So preventing premature deaths due to suicide across the lifespan. Reduce rates of other suicidal behaviors, reduce the harmful after effects associated with suicidal behaviors and their impacts on others, promote opportunities and settings to enhance resiliency, resourcefulness, respect, and interconnectedness for individuals, families, and communities. Our major goals are to promote awareness that suicide is a preventable public health problem, develop broad support for suicide prevention, develop and implement suicide prevention strategies for consumers of health services, develop and implement suicide prevention programs, and promote means restriction. So that's the National Suicide Prevention major goals. So that's a nationwide thing. That doesn't all fall on your shoulders, I promise. You're just a piece of this puzzle. So continuing, implementing training for recognition of at-risk behavior, development and promote effective clinical care, improve access to services, improve reporting in the media, promote and support research, improve and expand surveillance systems. I know this seems a lot utopic, but there are many, many, many things in the works that are helping reach these goals and get us one step closer. So if we can continually keep moving one step closer, we will be able to eventually reach these goals. Historical suicide school-based prevention programs. So educating our teachers, our school counselors, parents about suicide warnings, raising student awareness, encourage self-referral, train peers to recognize and refer, identify highest risk students through combination of screenings, multi-stage assessments, and education of school staff. I know in Kentucky it was considered to do a mental health screening at the changes of grades, whether it's 8th grade going into freshman year, and so on and so forth. So I think that's another step in the right direction that the Commonwealth is trying to take. So there are many youth-focused suicide prevention programs that are available. Too few of them have supporting research to establish that they are safe and effective. Most include enhanced resiliency, encouraging help seeking and education, teachers, counselors, students, family, and suicide warning, and positive interventions. How we fit into this as CASA advocates, though, is making sure that we are the bridge to the piece of this puzzle, because we are primarily with students and with kids who are in transition, whether it's with the parents, whether it's with a foster parent or somewhere in between, and making sure we're bridging that gap to be that consistent force for a protective factor while they're in this transition, because that's enough as it is. So there are ways to find programs like this. There are programs going on in schools currently. It would be awesome to reach out to your guidance counselor if you have a chance to see what kind of programs they're implementing. I'm so sorry. It's just because we're outside. So do these programs work? There are so many programs out there that making sure we pick and choose the right programs to implement into our schools is going to be what's important. And so really challenge your school if you don't feel like that they are going above and beyond to what needs to happen. Most all schools have programs in place. It's just, what are we doing to actually work towards bettering our suicide prevention? So I think this first bullet point's super important. So nobody's wanting to do the research in their schools or college as it suggests they have a problem. With my time with the Prevention Center at Fort Worth Behavioral Health, we actually surveyed Murray State students, Murray State freshmen, and 25% said that they had considered suicide in the last 12 months. So that's not for everyone who has had a plan but has contemplated. And so 1 of 4 is a pretty considerable number, especially for I'm not saying especially for our area, but it's a considerable number for any area. But it just brings light that there's issues. So how can we make a cohesive effort to try to get a hold of it? So major barrier. So there is a big stigma when it comes to suicide, that talking about suicide will encourage the behavior. It's actually not true. Studies now show that the discussion of suicide with young people does not increase suicidal ideation or behaviors. But here's what we do know. In children and adolescents, the 5 most diagnosed mood disorders are major depressive disorder, dysthymic disorder, and bipolar disorder. So for bipolar disorder, it has to have those 2 poles, the manic side as well as the depressive side. So the manic side is more impulsive, more quick to make rash decisions, and things like that. Whereas the other pole would be the major depression, kind of symptoms. So in children and adolescents, and a major depressive disorder episode lasts an average of 7 to 9 months. Majority do not receive treatment. Untreated depression is the #1 cause of suicide. So here are some symptoms that we can be on the lookout for. Whether there's any changes in sleep patterns, how are you sleeping? You look like you have some really dark bags under your eyes. What's going on? Are you sleeping well? Where are you sleeping at? Do they have their phone with them 24/7? Are they completely connected? What is an issue with sleep? If we're not getting enough sleep, or if we're sleeping too much, because there can be two poles to that as well. Changes in appetite, eating more, eating less, lowered self-esteem, criticize themselves or feel criticized by others, increased social isolation, decreased concentration, decreased energy, motivation, increased experimentation or use of alcohol substances. What are some other symptoms that we think for youth depression?
Withdrawing from their friends.
Absolutely. If they are not doing what activities that they normally like to do, that can definitely be a sign of depression as well. Irritability, worrying, stomach aches, headaches, sadness, tearfulness. These are all symptoms. Thoughts of death, suicide, self-harm, hopelessness, pessimistic outlook. My mom always said that was just my teenage years with a pessimistic outlook. So we have to consider the person too, to see what's really going on. But here's our deadly triad that we really want to be on the lookout for and see if we have any of these going on. Is there alcohol involved? What kind of substance is alcohol? Is it a stimulant that gets you revved up, or is it a depressant that gets you wind down?
I think it can do both.
Absolutely. So the majority of alcohol is a depressant. And so it's going to lower inhibitions. It's going to make our bad moods worse. So if we have a lowered inhibition mixed with a horrible situation, whether girlfriend, boyfriend just broke up, whether they've just been moved to yet another foster home, whether they had to move back in with parents, there's so many different places where our kids could be in major distress. If we mix all of that with a firearm, then that's a deadly triad. A firearm is one of the more deadly means that people attempt suicide with. So remove alcohol by denying access, remove firearms by denying access, reduce distress, which we can advocate for no substances. We can advocate for no firearms. We can advocate for reduced distress. But we also have a limited portion of how much we can actually control as well. So that's going to be difficult for us. But if we have a good rapport with parents, if we have a good rapport with foster parent, if we have a good rapport with our kiddo, making sure that we know that these are important things to stay away from, because it lowers our inhibition and could lead to fatal causes. So maintaining contact, daily check-ins, weekly check-ins, however often you need to check in, even if it's 3 times a day. How are you doing during and after a crisis might occur? Access for counseling and care by a well-trained, competent professional, whether it's court-ordered or not. For all of our kids who have gone through a trauma, it is very, very, it would be an added protective factor that would give them tools for their toolbox so that they can get through distress and they can get through low moments like this in their life. So there are a list of the references for the first part of this course. All right, so we are going to take a small little break so I can look at the questions to see if we have any questions. It's so is Bill 42 a Kentucky bill or a national bill? It is a Kentucky bill. So, and I think that would be amazing for colleges to implement as well, because how cool would that be? But, you know, that's my opinion. So if you have any questions, you can either speak them or if you want to put them in the chat box as we go on to our next section, which is the actual QPR material. I am going to give Child Watch booklets. These are QPR booklets. They are quick and easy to keep on you. They're just a reminder of the training that we're doing today. So since we are not together, I will keep them there because that's a place we all have in common. Also, what I'm going to keep there too is National Suicide Prevention Lifeline cards. These are small little cards that you can keep in your wallet. They have on the inside suicide warning signs. And then on the front, they also have the phone number for the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. There is also a texting line that is available as well. All right.
I have a question.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Is there any, this is Lorraine, is there any studies why Kentucky, and looks like especially Western Kentucky, why we have so many suicides?
So there are many theories, but no pointed answers. I really wish I could answer your question, but the truth is we just don't know. We've looked at, and for our region, to be fair, for our region, youth are not the top risk group for suicide. The top risk group for suicide is those between 40 and 60.
In Kentucky?
In our region specifically, in the western part of the state. But we still have higher, youth suicide. There's also consideration for potential suicide contagion as well. So if one person's completing suicide, then so another one will, so another one will, so another one will. I know I live in Massac County in Illinois, and we had that several years ago. It was really, really horrific. But yeah, we don't know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So here is the meat and potatoes. So like CPR, we are going to go through QPR. So question, persuade, refer. So this is to offer an emergency intervention and to be that gatekeeper. So QPR is not meant to be a be-all, end-all. QPR is meant to bridge and offer hope to our kids. It's meant to bridge and offer hope to anyone who is struggling. So there is an assumption that passive systems don't work. So those most at risk for suicide tend to not self-refer for treatment tend to be treatment resistant, often abuse drugs and or alcohol, dissimulate their level of despair, go undetected, and go untreated. Most suicidal people send warning signs. Warning signs can be taught. So we as gatekeepers can be trained to recognize the suicide warning and to intervene with someone they know. Gatekeepers, we are supported by our supervisors at CASA, but we're also supported by our community as well. So we always have to have this kind of in the back of our mind. There's always going to be that possibility for suicide ideation. But with our training today, we're going to know the risk factors. We're going to be able to recognize the symptoms of distress and depression, recognize suicide warning signs, what to say, when to say it, and what to do. And I feel like, if anything, these can be tools of hope, and it's almost a relief to be able to know this information to be able to get through that. So here's the chain of survival. In CPR, we have a chain of survival as well. It's, knowing that there's an emergency and then being able to call 911 and getting help and resources. But however, in QPR, early recognition of warning signs, early application of QPR, early referral to professional care, early assessment and treatment. So with the assessment and treatment, with early referral and referral to care, I know that it's difficult when we feel like this is an emergency now. Why do I have to wait 5 months to get an appointment? Because we are in a rural area, because we do have limited resources, it's difficult. It really is. But there are always emergency services available. So whether emergency services looks like calling the hotline, whether emergency services looks like going to the hospital, whether the emergency services looks like going to be seen at a counseling center, those are some of the early, well, they wouldn't even be early referrals, they would be emergent referrals. But those are options too. So hopefully we can find it early. However, if we recognize the problem later, we have those options as well. So here are our goals. So detection, active intervention, alleviation of immediate risk factors, accompanied referral. So you going with them or you calling with them to make that referral and them not being entrusted to do it by themselves. That's what the accompanied referral is meaning. Access to treatment, accurate diagnosis, and aggressive treatment. So we are trying to intervene within this pathway of suicidal thoughts to suicidal warning signs to suicide attempt to suicide, injury, or death. We want to interfere at some point. So that is where our intervention opportunities of question, persuade, refer come in, as well as the awareness, surveillance, and detection. So typically suicidal thoughts and suicidal warning signs come from a perceived insoluble problem. There is no other way that we can get through, and this is the only option we have.
Go for treatment.
So if you're reading through this, a simple truth is the person most likely to prevent you from taking your own life is someone you already know. This is the network theory. So here's our scenario. A depressed 16-year-old student in crisis over poor school performance review, girlfriend leaving him, and recent truancy. So here we have our youth in crisis. We have coded clues to the coach, coded clues to the school nurse, to the parents, no clues to the pastor, coded clues to the best friend, clear verbal threats and uncoded clues to the girlfriend. So over to the left bottom, you'll see where it says self-referral unlikely, hotline call unlikely, intervention unlikely. So here's how we were able to break this down. Question was asked, persuaded, referral completed. So youth advocate applies QPR. So I know if we look back that we were given no clues whatsoever. However, if we had gotten clues, we would be able to apply this intervention and hopefully be able to intervene. So highly reliable school. So typically in school settings, we would love for everyone to complete basic QPR gatekeeper training. This is just level after level of what we would hope the environment would look like. It's not always going to be that ideal in the schools that our kiddos go to, but that's a start of hope. So we fall into the non-traditional gatekeepers, and we also fall into the plus anyone. So just like CPR, the more people who are trained to be able to perform that life-saving technique, the more people we have the opportunity of saving, because it's that herd immunity, or it's that ability to be able to act when we're needed. The same applies for QPR. The more trained, the more we're able to intervene. If it takes a village, do you live in one? I know it's commonplace. I was always taught when I was growing up, oh, it takes a village, it takes a village, it takes a village. And I actually took a village. When I was 9, my mom had cancer, and so we had to be a village to be able to get through that time. So this is absolutely true too. If we have a problem, who are we going to be able to turn to? And is that going to be a safe place for us? And so getting into their head too, that's kind of important as well. So here we go. Hi, I'm Joe. I'm 16. Here's my community. We are 150 strong. With none of the circles having any sort of training as far as this is concerned, if Joe is in a crisis, who is he going to be able to turn to? In his village, he doesn't have anybody. Hi again. Some people here can help me if I have problems. It's better for everyone involved to have a little bit of training, but being able to rely on certain individuals within our village can be very comforting. Joe here, this is my village, and everyone can help. So this is our utopia. This is our ideal. We know it's not necessarily always going to be the case, but it would sure make such a comfier place to be able to open up to whomever you want to be able to go to. So all right. I am going through the PowerPoint real quick. So how we ask the suicide question. There is pluses and minuses to how we ask. So hold on. Okay. What questions do you have for me so far?
As CASAs, how far, like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes we think that too much help is crossing a line, but when it comes to suicide, like, how far can we go within our role?
That's a great question. What we want to do is however far we're comfortable with going. Does that make sense? So what I mean by that is we can, if our child is in distress, we can absolutely ask the question. We can persuade them to want to live, and we can offer that hope. And then we can refer them to further resources. So that's the basis of that training, or of this training. And so what is important too is to make sure that we let everybody else who is within our network know what's going on. So I think that's going to be a basis of where we're coming from too, is making sure that we keep everybody in the loop and we keep offering those resources, because we want to make sure that this crisis isn't going to continue on, even though it can last 7 to 9 months. I know. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hey, your pamphlets that you showed a bit ago, can those possibly be scanned and emailed? I know that a lot of foster parents receive training on suicide prevention, but for example, my parent is not. She's a family caretaker, you know, so she doesn't necessarily have the training and the signs and symptoms and things to look for. So I think it might be great if we could, you know, get our hands on that material so that I might educate her.
Absolutely. I don't care at all to make sure that Jen and Liz and Stephanie get this information and they can share it all over the place. Let's see. I'm trying to access the scenarios and things that we went over the last time. I apologize for the delay. Any other questions that you guys might have? Oh, hold on. Treated where? Four Rivers, if I accompany someone for a referral, where do I seek help? So Four Rivers is a great opportunity. They have a crisis line. They have child services, things like that. If we're in that emergency situation, we're going to call the suicide hotline. The suicide hotline for our area picks up in Mayfield. So it's local people who know the area. and they're going to try to get as much information as possible, as well as trying to help bridge that gap as well. So if we, so emergency departments have to see anybody with a life-threatening emergency. So suicide attempts, suicidality, those are all life-threatening emergencies. And so that's going to be something that they would be able to be seen for. However, we want to make sure that that parent or guardian, whomever has custody for them at that point, making sure that they are the ones that take them and get that care for them. So Miss Deborah Brandon asked how we can get cards and the pamphlets and things like that. Like I said, I'll have it at I'll give it to Jen and Liz, and then they can share it at the CASA office when everything opens back up. I know this is a trying time right now. Let's see, is there a link on the back that we can email? I will see about if there's a downloadable link that we could potentially send to.
So we'll be looking for that, guys.
They can't hear you. Can they? Awesome. Let's see. Okay. So just like the video showed earlier, when we were talking with, or when we were looking at the teens about kind of what to say, how to say it, when to say it, what to offer. So when we're asking the question, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Making sure that we're not kind of putting down that idea. I know that sounds weird to say, but we're trying not to make them think that their idea is dumb. We're not making them try to think that their idea is crazy. We're not trying to make them think that they're anything but going through a hard time. So you're not thinking about doing anything crazy like suicide, are you? That's not a best connotation to kind of present that information, because then you don't seem like that trusted, safe person that they want to come to. So that's going to be important to make sure that if we ever are asked this question, that we are completely direct. There's also indirect ways to ask as well, as far as, you're not wanting to kill yourself, are you? Things like that. If we are not able to ask the suicide question and we feel like there is somebody that is at risk for suicide, we need to find somebody who is willing to ask that question, whether it be the social worker, whether it be our supervisor. We need to make sure that these kiddos, whomever you're talking to is getting help. Absolutely. Are you considering harming yourself? Those are all safe ways to say that. One thing that if they're considering suicide, if they get really, really happy, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It could be a bad thing because they've made their plans and they have given their things away that they want specific people to have. So if you've seen somebody, in my opinion, if you've seen somebody that's been really down or has been exhibiting these other behaviors that has been talked about, and then all of a sudden they do this total turnaround, that's a really red flag for me.
Absolutely. I think that's you hit the nail on the head with that one. They could truly be getting better, and that's fine, but it's also a warning sign too that things might get really, really bad really, really quick, because they've already made these plans, they've already prepared, they've already gotten through what they want to get through. I know when we were able to have QPR in class, we were able to pair off into separate sections and try out different scenarios. And I wish we could do that today. But just recognizing that it's okay to ask the question. It's okay to ask if somebody is considering suicide. It's almost a relief if somebody is considering and you ask, because then they're like, oh my goodness, I can talk to you. Some may be that way, some may not. But if we ask, we get the opportunity to alleviate any of those symptoms if they have it. Persuading, we're really wanting to persuade to see the bright side, to see the hope. This is what we're wanting to do, is we're wanting to offer hope. This isn't a be-all, end-all to protection, but we can live to tomorrow. And then referring. Like I said earlier, the national hotline, making sure that we're referring to counseling resources, even if it's referring back to the school guidance counselor too. Just making sure we have all of those connections and making sure that we have everybody in our community who's trained and who's looking out for the betterment of this person. I don't believe I have much more. Any final questions? I am going to type in the chat box the suicide prevention lifeline number. I think it's super important to keep it in your phone. Keep it in your back pocket. If you need it for a rainy day, you have it. The two numbers that I usually keep in my phone are poison control and suicide lifeline. So those are my two faves. Any other questions, comments, concerns that you guys, thank you so much for bearing with me through me trying to find the additional resources that I wasn't able to find. I'm so sorry. Any other questions?
Hey, Clarissa.
Hey, Rachel.
Can you hear me? Hey.
Yep.
So I just wanted to give a brief little note. Some people know this, some people don't. But my son, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, was in a really bad place, and he reached out to suicide hotlines. And the first thing I did when I found out was I thanked him. I'm like, thank you so much for reaching out and getting some help, and what can I do to help you? But just by telling him thank you, that I was proud of him for reaching out, really helped to lift his spirits.
Absolutely. Suicide is no stranger to my family, and it's difficult being the survivor of suicide, especially when I've been working in suicide prevention, and especially when I've been on the prevention side of things, and then finding that in my own family, prevention efforts haven't necessarily worked the best. It's almost like a survivor's guilt too, but making sure that reaching out for help is normalized. It's not a sign of weakness, but it's empowering for them to be able to feel confident enough to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Well, I appreciate you guys so much for spending your hour with me and trudging through this material, making sure that we are in our kiddos' villages. We are trained to answer the call should we need to. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank